Hi everyone, welcome back to book club. It's Friday, my favorite day, hopefully your favorite day. And this week is a very special week. Not only, have I been really wanting to talk about this book ever since I read it, but when I began reading it, the first person who I wanted to share it with was my best friend, Charlotte Lawrence. And Charlotte and I grew up together, so as I was reading this, just as a young woman, I felt like she would also really appreciate and have a lot of empathy for this book, so I'm very excited to have her on here. The book this week that we read was My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. I got through this book, I think, in one day because I just was so immersed in it. And it was actually Kate Elizabeth Russell's first book that she ever put out. It's dedicated to the real life Dolores Hayes and Vanessa Wye, whose stories, have not really been heard or understood or maybe even believed, as is the case for a lot of these real life stories that deal with emotional and sexual abuse. It is a controversial novel about the long-term damages of this kind of abuse, silencing power dynamics, manipulation, misplaced guilt, things like that. And I think it's very important for, young women to know those things. The relevance actually comes, this book was writing kind of off of the beginning of the Me Too movement. So the relevance of this book, it was actually called the Lolita of the Me Too era. I do want to do a quick disclaimer before we go into discussing the book more. This book is controversial because it does fictionalize and sensationalize a little bit an inappropriate relationship between a student and her teacher. But it is relevant because it shows stories like this are not about love. They are in fact very damaging to a young woman, and it does reflect on that as she is older. But I really cannot articulate enough the importance of a young woman knowing that these stories are not glamorous, they're not sexy, they're real and they're harmful. And, the narrator says a lot in the book, I just really need it to be a love story. And that just shows that in reality she knows that it wasn't, but that was part of her process. Now, a brief synopsis of the book. It follows 15-year-old Vanessa as she meets her 42-year-old English teacher, Jacob Strane, who is already, tangled up in some sexual abuse allegations from other students. It follows as she flips from defending him at a young age and as she reaches clarity and insight into the power dynamic and abuse that actually occurred. So it goes from her being older, having some insight, and looking back and kind of these flashbacks that she has, as she comes to terms with the abuse she endured as the first time wave of the Me Too movement, all the accusations were coming to light. So, not that Charlotte needs any introduction, but I really do I cannot say enough how much this woman means to me. She has been my best friend for the longest time. We grew up together, we had a lot of the same experiences, and I'm really grateful that literature has given us, a way to share a lot of things and talk about a lot of things. So, let's bring her on here so we can talk about it. I'm so excited.
Hey, Kaia.
I love you.
Hi. Oh my God, you're so cute giving the intro. I was like this, yeah, so agree. Like,
I
oh,
was like,
she's so
did you tell me I was
smart.
smiling when I was like waiting for your face to
Yeah,
pop?
well, because I was like, looking at like, I need to find a request.
I was like,
I've never
where's
done this
Charlotte?
before.
Well, thank you for doing this with me.
Oh my God, of course. I love the book. I need to read more, and you've been inspiring me to read, so I'm so happy that I
That's the
loved the
best
book so
compliment you could
much.
ever give me, but thank you for reading it. I was like, I know it's a long book. I gave you,
I know
by the way,
she
when we were
prefaced it
gonna do
because she
this,
knows that I don't read. She was like, I mean, I do read, guys. I'm
I was
a
like,
good reader.
I know you don't read, but here's a novel.
You were like, it's really good. It's about a young girl like this. I was like, okay, fine. And I loved it. I finished it in like 2 days.
It's
Do you remember
such
we were
a
texting about it? I was like, oh my God, have you gotten
I
the
also
book
was
part
like
yet?
pushing you to keep up with me because I was like,
Yeah.
I need to talk about this right now.
Oh my God, it was amazing. It was so
Yeah,
sad though.
I know. So thank you for coming on and for doing this with me.
Of course.
I have some questions for you.
Ask away.
Um, I was gonna say, was it your first time reading the book? I take it it was.
Yes, it was. I heard
Will you
about it
read
before,
more now?
though. Of course. It's my
That's my
favorite
next
type of book,
question.
too.
Yeah,
Because
I
it's
really.
modern, but it talks about, issues that have been around forever
Yeah,
and highlights, like, even, you know, older books that have the same issues and stuff. So it was really interesting that it was like, okay, this easily happened yesterday, but also 100 years ago, you know?
these issues have been happening forever, and they haven't always had the place to, be voiced. So I think that's why I
Yeah.
like the book so much. Did you feel a sense of frustration in the moments where you feel Vanessa trying to justify the relationship?
Oh my God, completely. You're like screaming at her. Like from the get-go, from the first time he looked at her weird and like touched her knee weird, I was like, what? Fuck no. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
immediately you go, what the fuck are you doing? It's like,
yeah,
and it's sad too. It's like you kind of feel, I mean, at least for me, like I was so like almost catching myself getting like mad at her for not doing anything. And then I was like, wait, that's not right at all. Like, and then I felt kind of guilty about it. It's like, it was a whirlwind of emotions because you're just like, it's so sad. Like, this poor girl is so young and she just doesn't understand it yet. You know what I mean? But it's like, all
no,
you want to do is be like, older sister her, you want to mom her and be like, what?
exactly.
Stop. Like, this isn't okay. Like, this is going to fuck you up for the rest of your life, you
Because
know?
you're looking at it from an objective standpoint, and then
Yeah,
suddenly,
from the
like,
outside.
when you're reading and seeing her thought process, it's a really interesting way to tell like an abuse story like this
Yeah.
from the victim's point of view, because you see the way that she justifies it in her head and you want to grab her, but you also don't know like what her process is until the end, so you kind of just
Oh,
have to allow
completely.
her to go through it.
Completely. And it's also, it's like she herself doesn't even, realize that she's a victim for, oh my God, like 20 years. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? So it's like you have to kind of sympathize with her more, like very, very, very objectively of like, okay, I'm just going to understand this with her and like go through this process with her as she's,
yeah.
switching from older to younger and stuff rather than just.
Meanwhile, all you want to do is just be
It's
like,
just be like, no, don't do it. Walk away from him.
I know, and you just want to hold her and like give
Yeah.
her love and all of that. Did it give you a different perspective on your own experience as a young woman, hearing someone else's recount of the story and like the way that her mind was working as a young woman?
Completely. I think, I want to say everybody, but I don't know if it's everybody. I'll speak for myself and for you as well, is like growing up in a city like Los Angeles, you kind of tend to grow up very quickly and you're surrounded by all older people from such a young age, and it feels so natural, and like because of, my surroundings, I always tended to like, date older guys or hang out with older guys or like find myself attracted to older guys and stuff. And like, I always had the mentality till I was probably 18 of like, I'm an old soul. It doesn't matter that I'm young. I'm older. It doesn't matter. And then it's like, I turned 20 a few months ago and my little brother is 17. And I'm just like, if anybody over the age of 20 tried to flirt with you, I'd fucking kill them. And it's like,
Right.
and you get a different perspective because I'm like, it's really crazy. It's like you don't think certain things can be kind of deemed as inappropriate or unacceptable or something that might end up being traumatic or like sticking with you for the rest of your life when you're that young, because I was so like, oh, I'm
think
older, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter, I'm like, I'm cool, I'm like, they like me because I'm special. And it's like I found myself saying like some of the things, like remembering myself saying the things that she was saying of like, but I'm special, he said it's only me, like we're actually in love, you know what I mean? And like
It really gives you perspective when it's your own experience, and
completely.
It definitely makes you like rethink a lot of the things that you heard yourself saying at that age. Thinking at that age,
no, completely, because you're like, wait, I wasn't special.
Yeah.
That it's like, no, it's like that it is inappropriate to have a relationship with someone that's 15, like even just, it's like you're still a kid and you look at kids that are like now that age and you're like, oh, you're you're a kid, like you're not an old soul, like you're a kid, you know what I mean? So it did bring a lot of like, whoa, like that's crazy. I looked at it a completely different way, and now it's like maybe that wasn't appropriate, you know what I mean?
He's
And
very
like,
protective, I
yeah,
think, over women in general.
completely.
But especially, you know, just the power dynamic between, you know, the age differences, as well as him being her teacher and being
Yeah.
42, and the way that she really wanted to write it and experience it as a love story.
Yeah.
When even she knows and the readers know that that was not, in fact, what it was.
Completely. And I think that that was kind of like a part of his way of like getting to her, you know, giving her all the books and like making her read Lolita and this was like he knew how obsessed she was with Lolita and like all of the love stories and the this and like the, you know, romanticizing things that could be deemed as very inappropriate and controversial. And you know, that was kind of his end of like, she's gonna fall in love with me, you know what I mean? Like I'm also her teacher, I'm smarter, I'm wiser. It was like a whole bunch of things.
And that absolutely ties into this idea of like psychological grooming.
Yeah,
is such
completely.
in life, in books, I mean, it's just constantly coming up. And you know, she sees it as love, because she actually says this great quote that I have. She says, to be groomed is to be loved and handled like a precious, delicate thing. And I think in his process of grooming her, because she had never been in love before, all this attention she was getting, all this love she was giving her books. But she even says a quote about the books, like, I realized I thought he was giving me my own lens to see the world through, but he wanted me to see the world through his lens.
Yeah.
So like this shaping of her mind, seeing her vulnerabilities and playing into them, is such a toxic and dangerous thing when you're, you know,
completely
at any age really for a woman. But
oh, completely. It's like the age difference it's one thing on its own. The psychological grooming aspect of it was really like getting into this, you know, into Vanessa's mind and like and just manipulation on another level. And it was probably so confusing for her. And like, you know, it's everybody, even like when you're 12 or 15 or however old you were and you have like your first little peck in a game, you're like, oh my God, I'm in love with him. You know what I mean? It's very easy for somebody without any life experiences to snap like this and feel so, you know, such a strong emotion, even though it's like obviously not real and not a real situation. It's just like every role kind of played into each other, like the power role and, you know, the abuse of that, and then the way he groomed her and like made her believe that it was like he was this fucking angel and like that he's so perfect for her. Like that was a part of it too, was like it wasn't just like, you know, he made himself seem like a king in a sense, you know, that she was like, I need to be with this guy. I need him to like me. I need him to like me. You know what I mean?
Of course. And I think like for me, the part that just like hurt me the most and I thought was like the most disturbing was that, you know, he wants her to be a child and she thinks that he sees her as an adult and that's why he's in love with her. And, you know, when he buys her the little girl pajamas, like she sleeps at his house, like that to me just felt so wrong, because I think in her head she's like, oh, the reason he's in love with me is because
I'm older.
Sees me as older.
Yeah.
But throughout the book you get these little hints of like him.
No, it's pedophilia, that he's like views her as a child and that's what he likes about her. And it was the same with the other girl that came out. You know what I mean? And like the more stories that were told is they were all children, that it was like that was his thing. And that was really sad too, because it's like I think that you kind of at the beginning of the novel, at least for myself, you kind of want to root for the fact that like maybe it's just her, maybe she looks super old, maybe it's this, but it's like every single maybe gets proven wrong like instantly. You know what I mean? That it's like, no, that's scary and bad and manipulative, and he's done it multiple times with other children, and it's like it's just he's such a bad person. And it's like
even the way that she views the other victims like later on in life is upsetting, because, you know, you'd hope that women would, you know, come together and like grieve together and experience this together and get that insight by talking about it. Which is very actually quite protective over him. And didn't want to see herself as a victim, so didn't even identify with these other women who were coming up.
And like judge them and didn't believe them at first. But I understand it though. I understand that mentality of also not just plain out not wanting to be a victim, you know what I mean, and not wanting to take that, like, it was such a long period of her life, this guy. Like, it started when she was 15, but they were on and off, still seeing each other. He was on her mind 24/7 for so many years, like, until she was an adult.
She engaged
Yeah.
at least kept in touch with him. And, this idea of victimhood, like, she refuses to categorize it as abuse.
Yeah.
Because it is a fiction book, like, this novel kind of affects your understanding of victimhood, and it gives you a different perspective where you start to have sympathy for, the reasons why someone might not want to consider themselves as a victim.
Completely.
For a long time until they can really get the clarity. And even then, it's like, it is heartbreaking because she wants to be able to tell her own love story. And this was, like, in her head for a long time, the love of her life. So I think, she has a quote about just the fact that and I'll have to find it, but by admitting it as abuse, it would take away her personal experience of the love that she actually felt from it.
Yeah, and it's just, it wasn't just like a one night thing that, she would be able to process and mentally process and, like, deal with that one night. You know what I mean? It was such a long period of time. I feel like admitting that she was a victim is admitting that the entire time that she knew him, she was a victim, which she was. And it's like, it just kind of, it kind of takes a whole chunk of her life out. And it's like, that was fake, what you were feeling, and that was bad, and you were a victim, and you were abused. It's like,
feels discredited by being labeled as a victim. And she said, like, she eventually feels comfortable calling it abuse, but even hearing it from someone else's mouth, the word suddenly becomes the most disgusting thing to her, and she can't bear to hear it. She feels like it strips her of all of real emotions that she had as a young woman, being groomed and gaslighted by this 42-year-old man who, and I think, like, the biggest thing for me is she has to understand that it wasn't her responsibility to say no, and to, he was the older person. It was...
Oh, completely. She had no responsibility in it, and no sort of, like, fault in anything whatsoever. You know what I mean? Sorry, I'm trying to close this door. It wasn't... This house is fucking ridiculous. It's like every door is like a door to break your fingers on. What was I saying? She has zero part to play in everything. But I also think, a quote that I remember, I'm forgetting the exact one. I don't have anything written down, but it was something along the lines of, like, kind of justifying that it wasn't rape, that it was just, like, it wasn't that, it was consensual, she was into it, whatever, that it was, like,
she says, I have the quote, she says, the difference between sex and rape is the state of mind, or is consent.
Yeah, that's the one. And I was just like, I feel like it made me kind of think that her accepting that she was and is a victim, she's like, it makes her probably feel so stupid, because she's like, I didn't say no, I did it, I slept with him, I was obsessed with him, I went to his house. It's like, you blame yourself and you keep going and spiraling of, like,
right. And then she has
like,
to,
what did I do,
and deal with, now she has to process getting raped, and the fact that it was not consensual.
That the entire relationship was just wrong, and that she was under, she was being groomed and under manipulation. It was just, like, accepting that, I think, was her final, like, one of the final things she, like, had to face head on. Because even, like, when the girl came out and this and that, and she was, like, asking herself questions, it was still kind of like, am I? No. You know what I mean? It was very much so, like, pushing it away. But it's like accepting that everything happened was legitimate and was bad is just connects all the dots of, like, what did I do? Like, oh my God, like, it's my fault. I did this. Like, I shouldn't have let him even touch my knee. I should have told somebody right away. You know what I mean? It's like, you think of all the things you could have done.
No one can, predict how they're going to react when something like that happens. And there is no wrong way to react when something traumatic is happening to you. And I actually forgot to say this, but Kate Elizabeth Russell, who wrote the book, later came out saying, you know, this was based on real life events that happened to her. She did release it as fiction to distance herself from the story.
Yeah.
And her, as a grown woman, it is hard, you know, to retell these stories in their entirety and truthfully, because it can feel very vulnerable. You can feel, again, like you're having your experience stripped. And I do think a big part of the fear of women speaking out is that you will then only be able and tied back to this experience.
Yeah.
I hope that women know that that is so not the truth, and that is completely the wrong idea to have. It's like, we can stand together, we can lift you up, and we can help you.
Yeah. That it's like you know, you obviously make your own decision, only you, of how you want to handle any sort of trauma in your life. But it's like, if you come out, every fucking woman nowadays especially will support you and hold your hand. It's like, I think we've seen and read and heard enough stories of women not being believed, and it's just like, it's time. And I don't know, I think that this book, like, going along, you know, with the whole Me Too movement was special and eye-opening, because it told a story from a very different point of view of somebody for the entirety of the book not even, you know, believing it, and not even thinking that she was a victim, and not even thinking that he did anything wrong, and just being so sure in the fact that she was in love with him. You know what I mean? And we never really hear those stories of, like, the brutal truth of, like, what is also abuse. And it's not like, you know, A plus B equals C of easy, like, okay, that is wrong. It's like, it's very obviously wrong, but to the person itself, it doesn't feel like it's wrong. And I feel like this book, you know, above everything, can maybe educate, you know, people and young girls a little bit too, of like, okay, like, that isn't appropriate, this isn't okay, like, I know this, and I, you know, now it's in my head, and like, I if I go through something like this, I have gone through something like this, if this whatever, like, I'm gonna be supported, and it's gonna be okay. It's like, it's a very, I found the book sad, but also, like, important and educational.
And what makes the book so special is that it is told from a victim's point of view, you know. And
Yeah.
it does tie a lot back to Lolita. They talk about Lolita a lot in the book. But Lolita was super controversial because you sympathize with the narrator, who is the person in power of the book. And that's why this book is so different, because you're actually hearing it from the victim herself.
Yeah.
And, you know, while Vanessa does think that she's in control a lot of the time, it kind of separates her from Lolita, and she even says that, like, she feels like the difference between her and Lolita is, like, she knows what's going on, and she's in control. She's not
and she always said that. She was like, yeah, but I'm not a victim. Like, I know exactly what's going on. That's the only difference. But, like,
right.
Besides that, she compares herself to Lolita 24/7. The red hair, everything, and thinks that that's their story, that it's this romantic love story, that is their.
And Lolita is, you know,
huge ending.
a lot of the time in a very problematic way. Yeah. It does sometimes lead to young girls viewing a relationship like this as something to, you know, inspire a new love for them, and that is
completely
so not what it should be. And, you know, when she's older, I pulled a quote from the book. She says, "What conclusion is there to draw besides the obvious? He is Humbert and I am Dolores." So she's saying, like, in the end, she realizes, like, I wasn't different because I was.
Yeah, I wasn't different. I wasn't special. It's the same thing. I just romanticized it and, like, didn't know. Absolutely. She didn't know. Wasn't it, like, how could she have known? She was 15, you know? But Lolita, it's like, it's such an old book. So it obviously, like, you know, there was no such thing as people coming out about people in that sort of way that it is now today. And I know, you know, if that book came out today, it wouldn't be okay. It's so, it does glamorize, it glamorizes, you know, pedophilia on another level. But it was super important to this book, I think, that she related to it so much, but didn't even realize, like, the negative side of it till she was older. You know what I mean? Like, when she was a kid, like, oh my God, I'm Lolita. He gave me this because he's Humbert and he's this and I have red hair and this. But, like, she thought it was great. You know what I mean? Like, she thought it was amazing. And then she slowly realized of, like, oh my God, okay, I am a little bit different. Like, it's totally fine. I'm special. I'm not like her. I'm not a victim. And then she got older and she was like, no, we were the same and it was bad.
Yeah.
So it's
and
like
insight into it, I think, as she matures and can look at it from a bit more distance and can let go of this, like, you know, glamorizing her first love. And, you know, Vanessa and Jacob, they both reference Vladimir Nabokov so much.
Yeah.
And do you think that that changed the way that their relationship progressed? This constant kind of like Lolita dream that they had.
I think so. I think it was more her obsession with it kind of affected everything else around her. You know what I mean? And she didn't even realize it. Like we were saying before, that it's like, you know, her dreaming about this and like just constantly talking about it, bringing it into a relationship and having it be such a big part of her life kind of, I think, for her made the relationship more maybe exciting. I don't know the right word, but more like it felt right to her in the moment of like, no, it's fine. It's justified. This is great. Like this is in our relationship. You know what I mean?
That I admire, and that's why I think there is like books do hold so much power and so much space in people's minds, and so I think it's so important to like understand whether a book is a cautionary tale or a love story or what it is. And I think it's absolutely a cautionary tale of what can happen when you romanticize these inappropriate relationships and victim blaming and power dynamics and you know the complexity of emotional and sexual abuse on women especially. So this like the power, it does, I think later in her life she does kind of come to terms that the power dynamic, I think, interesting to talk about is like the fact that he was an English teacher when she was 15, and she wants to believe that she has the power and articulates that acknowledging his power takes away her experience and her story, the way she remembers it. Like, how do you feel like her saying that admitting he was in power took away the way that she wanted to remember this experience?
Well, I think having the power being taken away in that sense made her feel small and stupid and disregarded. And I think that throughout the novel he abused his power so continuously, and then at the end when they met up and all this was happening, he was very, very weak, and it was like every aspect of him. Physically he was really weak and like out of it and looked old and haggard, and also mentally like he was so scared and sad and freaked out and was lying and was freaking out.
I think for the first.
And I think that to me was when that dynamic of power kind of switched in her mind of like, I have the power now. Like, I'm the one that can ruin his life. I'm the one that can do this. He's weak in front of me, begging for me not to do something. Like, is this how it's always been? And I think it's like, you look back to the beginning of the novel, countless amount of times he was like, we can't tell anybody or you're going to get in trouble too. We can't say anybody did like this or you're going to get expelled. You're going to be this, like,
kicked out of school alone.
No, completely. It was like what he said was right. He got her kicked out, and it's bad and it's horrible. And it's like, I think though for the longest time she had this mentality of like, he is so in power, and he was abusing his power. But it's like when she got older and saw him like that, I feel like it switched of like, I had the power all along. And when she was young, she could like, that's why I think it's like that feeling of confusion and regret of like, why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do this? Is like everything comes back in the sense of like, I could have just told my mom or like a teacher and like really, really like done something this, but it's like, no, she couldn't have. Like, he had her under,
And the perspective that you get through life is not something, you can't skip ahead and learn lessons. You have to unfortunately learn.
No, you have to go through it.
This was such a tragic thing for Vanessa to have to go through, and for everyone. And it's not a new concept that's being written about or on the news. Like, this has been happening forever. It's unfortunately happening every day, and each experience is unique to the girl involved. And I think that's why there's so many spaces for these women to tell their stories, because no one can tell you how to feel, how to react.
No, and no one can tell you what was traumatic for you, what, like, no one can tell you how you feel, and it's only you. It's how you went through that journey, how you choose to handle it, how you want to be, and it's just the whole aspect of like this whole book, she was kind of controlled by something and suppressing her and by so many aspects, you know what I mean, that it's like was suppressed obviously by her teacher, was suppressed by her parents that didn't say anything when they saw the picture, was, you know,
Right.
when her dean expelled her. It's like constant.
She was like told by the world, you know, your voice doesn't matter,
doesn't matter.
your experience doesn't matter. And so I think eventually she felt so sad.
She was like, okay, it doesn't. I can't say anything. And that's, I mean, it relates though to our, that's why, again, like that's why women feel like they can't come out. It's like we, you know, there's so many things. There's 100 like things on a list that could go wrong, you know, in a woman's eyes of like, they're not going to believe me. They're going to think I'm crazy. They're going to try and do this, and this. Like, I'm going to be looked at as this. And it's like, it's sad. And it's disheartening that, you know, that still is going on. It's like women should be able to feel like they can come out about their experiences and be listened to. And
hopefully we reach a day where not one person, you know, makes them feel like they can't share their truth and their story. And I think like something that really stuck with me after reading the book was kind of wondering, you know, who would Vanessa be had she not had this experience? And like, from 15, you know, you grow and change so much in that time as a young woman. And so to have this kind of man who's really grooming and controlling,
in like the developing stages of your life,
you just can't help but wonder, you know, the things she might have missed out on, or she didn't even get to find out who she was without him. And that is like, I think, such a big loss, you know.
No, completely. And it shaped her permanently and shaped the way her life went and every relationship that she's ever going to have. And it's really sad. It's like you kind of you want to be able to think like, oh no, this, you know, like she's gonna be fine. And it's like you wish that she will be fine, and hopefully one day, you know, if it obviously it's fictionalized, but in the book that I reading the book made me really think like, fuck, he messed up this girl's life in such a crazy, horrible way, in such like a psychologically terrifying, like long overtime way, that it's just like, how do you accept that? Like, how do you go through that? And also that he's,
I think there is no justification in that.
No.
But in the end, she eventually finds healing in that.
Yeah.
That to me was a beautiful thing, that, you know, you don't have to justify the relationship. And I actually think she was justifying it until she began to heal.
Completely. She was justifying it her whole life.
And finally, I also like realized this as we were talking. You have a song called "Everybody Loves You" actually to be the soundtrack to this book that I think so well. And the Chicks covered it on their new album, and so that happened today, which is also crazy. And I just want you to talk about like writing that song and kind of what that song means to you and how it ties into the book.
Oh, I love you. Thank you.
My favorite song, by the way, that you've ever written.
I love you. Same with me. I don't know. I've never spoken about the song before. It's obviously a very, you know, it's a sad song, and it's a song that was so important for me to write. And I never wrote it for anybody but myself. I always wrote it, you know, just I wrote it in like an hour as a therapeutic way to me, you know, for me to get out my emotions. I just think, you know, every girl has been through some sort of version of that one way or another. And you know, they vary. As we were talking about this entire time, is like everyone's experiences vary from, you know, 100 million different types of things. It's like women have to go through fucking shit all the time. And I don't know, I wrote the song about, you know, an experience I had that was inappropriate and traumatizing and bad, and for a while I always justified it and always thought that I was being crazy and it was okay because, you know, he was so popular and cool and everybody loved him and it was amazing. And I don't know, one day I just woke up and I was like, no, that wasn't okay, and that wasn't appropriate, and that even though everybody loves him and you know, he's been with other girls that haven't said anything and this and he's not looked at as a bad guy, he was still a bad guy to me, meaning he's a fucking bad guy. And I just had that realization one day of like, just because, you know, my experience is different doesn't mean that it's not real. And I had just that realization, kind of like Vanessa, that was like, one day you're like, wait a second, hold up, you know what I mean? Like, that wasn't okay. And
that voice in your head that's trying
that was like,
you don't want to
came out, that was like, you're right, you're stop suppressing yourself, like, you were right about this the moment it happened, you're right about this a year after, like, you'll always feel, you know, your feelings are justified and your feelings are okay. And it's like, that's just kind of it. And I woke up and I was in bed and I just wrote the song really quickly, and I felt such an immediate, like, I finally said it. I finally spoke my piece and finally, you know, was honest to myself about something. And then I was never going to put it out, and I put it out. So
people heard that song, you know, it helped me in so many ways with a lot of things.
Okay.
So many young women, and I think that's why, you know, books, music, however you choose to voice your truth, it's so important
And
to heal from it, but also help other people heal from it who
completely
have the tools or the ears that will hear them and will understand them and will empathize with them. And when you said, like, I feel like every girl to some degree will experience something like this, there's a quote I want to read. It says, somehow I sense this was coming from me even then. Really, though, what girl doesn't? It looks over you, that threat of violence. They drill the danger into your head until it starts to feel inevitable. You grow up wondering when it's finally going to happen. Not if it's going to happen, but when. And that is something women do. You grow up being like, not is this going to happen to me, but when, and what are the signs?
It's like, you grow up, you know, don't wear short skirts, like, always carry pepper spray. It's like, you know, and they even in Los Angeles, and I was in a very, like, liberal, cool, artsy school growing up, and it was very much like, we teach girls to be careful, we don't teach boys to not abuse girls. You know what I mean? Like, that was what every human development, whatever class was like, really, girls, you have to do this, you have to watch yourself, you can't, if a guy says this, don't do it. It wasn't like, guys,
you need to let women respectfully and
take care of women and
it puts
respect them.
In the head of young women when they're not thinking, is this going to happen to me? It's when and what did I do? And so with Vanessa's trying to,
what did I do wrong?
She's trying to think, what did I do wrong? I must have done something. And that is something society cannot be implanting in our heads, because it is not what you did wrong. It is completely wrong, and they have responsibility. And sometimes, unfortunately, that does mean demanding it from them. And so I really appreciate people like you, people like, you know, Kate Elizabeth Russell, people who do tell stories that, you know, can hopefully inspire other women to do the same, or at least feel from it.
Completely. I just think, you know, self-justification is such an important part in healing and getting that, you know, feeling within yourself of like, I am okay, I am strong, and I'm right about this. Like, that's as little as that, of like, what happened is right, what happened actually happened, and it was bad, and it wasn't because I was drunk, it wasn't because I was wearing short clothes, it wasn't because of this, it was genuinely because that person is a horrible person. That's it. If once you have that feeling of like, that is the only reason, I feel like that's when you can heal. And I also, though, to get to that feeling completely, but like, to get to that feeling, it's like, that's why it's so important for people to support other people. It's like, to get to that feeling, you have to feel like you could be supported by other women and by men as well, and be supported by, you know, the world and the times, and feel like you're not alone, and that it's, your feelings are so justified. You know what I mean? That it's like,
like, we have to, I think, as a society, allow ourselves to create the space for those people, because if there isn't, then they aren't going to feel encouraged to speak their mind. So it's like, we don't have to force a space for their experiences. We must, as a society, give these people the space to talk and heal.
Yeah, but you also, it's like, I know so many people, I mean, myself included, that it's like, you don't have to say anything either. Like, it's your choice. You don't have to say anything. It's as simple as just feeling like, if you wanted to, it would be okay, then that's all it is.
There would be people there to support you and to help you.
Yeah, and that, you know, people believe you, and and it's okay, and it's a normal, and it's sad to say that it's a like normal thing, because it's not a normal thing, but that it's a common thing that other women have gone through, and that, you know, you got to call these dudes out.
Absolutely. You know, you've got to sometimes, I think if that's part of your personal healing is telling your story, then I absolutely encourage people to do that.
Yeah, me too. It's get your justice, man. Like, get your fucking healing, however you want to get it. It's like, that's the whole thing too. It's like, as a woman, and, you know, speaking to you and other women that are watching and everybody, it's like, dude, you can do whatever you want. You're a fucking girl, and that's great. Like, do what you want to do, say what you want to say. Like, don't censor yourself just because you think that a man is gonna, you know, judge you for it. So it's like,
accountable. Absolutely.
yeah,
accountable. And I think victim blaming is something that fortunately we're getting more away from, but it still does happen all of the time, and that is
all the time.
fun.
I hope that
appreciate you enough for like sharing your
I love you,
and for being on here, and I'm gonna come give you a hug later today.
I know. Will you come over, please? Guys, Kaia was literally at my house maybe 2 hours ago.
I think I left just because she was like, should we just do it in the same room? And I was like,
should we go on like live stream or do it in the same room? Should we just face each other and talk?
So thank you for allowing, you know, me to leave for a second so we could do this from separate locations.
Of course.
And
I know, come back.
And also, everyone listen to Everybody Loves You Shorts version because it's so beautiful. And
I love you.
This book, it will like just perfectly tie everything up.
Thanks, Kai. I love you.
I love you so much.
This is so much fun. Can you please send me more books to read?
Absolutely. You're always welcome back. Always.
I know. I'll come back whenever. It's so much fun. It feels like we're just having a conversation, but then there's people watching.
I know, you feel like you're on FaceTime, and then you're like, oh, wait.
Literally.
Okay, I love you more than anything.
Oh my God. Well, I love you so much, okay? Come back. Come over.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, well, thank you guys for watching. Charlotte has been almost like an older sister and best friend and just one of my favorite people ever. And she makes beautiful music, some fun, some sad, and yeah, I really appreciate everyone listening in on such an important conversation. I know it's, you know, some of these things are harder to talk about, but books sometimes open up that space and allow people to tell their stories and be heard and be listened to and be understood. So we will be back next week with another book club. Thank you everyone who watched.